Hello, everyone. Season 2 is right around the corner. Season 1 is over, and I think because of that, now is going to be the best time to tell you what my final tier list is for Season 1. Obviously, I've had a couple of things that have brought a little bit of contention. You know how I feel about Lidia, about the video I put out saying that she's top 10. I even made a video in March of last year about why I thought Yoshimitsu was top 1. That aged very well. And now we have my final full tier list for the first time here on YouTube that I'm going to be showing you all today. Now, normally in tier lists like this, we're going to sit here for an hour as I place each individual character, but not me because I know that you're going to skip to the end of the video anyway. In fact, maybe you already have. So, because of that, I already have it compiled for you. Here it is. Oh, that's not exactly what I was expecting. First, we're going to give a little bit of context behind why this list is the way that it is. Then we'll break down a couple of individual characters that might stand out or might seem a little bit weird. And then finally, we'll compare this to the tier list that I made back in March of last year to see how things have changed. My opinion has changed over the year that Tekken 8 has been out. First off, let's discuss why this list is the way that it is. To put it very simply, let's start with the reason that this isn't ordered. I don't believe that you can order a tier list of any sort in this game. The first reason is that the balancing in this game for the most part is actually pretty solid. The difference between the 13th and 14th best character in the game is frankly very subjective, and it's character dependent. Depending on what character you play, how you perceive another character in the game is going to be vastly different than another player. Your perspective on these things, your general play style and how other characters play is going to change your perspective on how strong or weak you think certain characters are, certain gameplay styles are very greatly. In reality, there's such a little difference not only between one place and another, but even between, say, the 17th best character and the 22nd best character, that I don't think it's realistic to be able to order characters in this game, except for maybe the top 5. But even the bottom 5, I would be hard-pressed to do that. But even outside of the balancing, this game is very volatile when it comes to character strength. The first reason is because matchups in this game are much more important than they've been in other Tekken games. And this is because of the nature of how heat works, of how character gimmicks work, and they greatly affect where a character can be based on a specific matchup. For example, if you're playing a character that's generally considered bad like Asuka, but you're playing against a character that can very easily be countered by a lot of Asuka's gimmicks like Steve, for example, that's going to make Asuka a hell of a lot better. Of course, now we're just talking about more matchup charts, but this is a case in almost every facet of the game. Look at Yoshimitsu, for example. One of the reasons why he's considered top tier is because Flash and Spin shut down so many things. Yoshimitsu has really good matchups against characters like Reina because Flash is able to just shut down her stances. Then you also go to Feng with his back Kempo step, and that's going to stop characters like Asuka or Lidia from really being able to contest with him in neutral. Factors like these make it so that tiers are a lot more... Sorry, not tiers, but character placement is very dependent on matchups. And because it's so widespread throughout this game, it's another reason why I don't think that you can properly order characters, because with how matchups are in this game, it becomes kind of redundant. On top of that, though, there's a final piece of this that makes ordering not only redundant, but completely irrelevant, and that is stages. If you remember back in Tekken 7, King on Forgotten Realm was kind of a meme because was so strong with his Shining Wizard being able to break floors and give full combo. In this game, every character kinda has their own King on Forgotten Realm stage. And because of that, stages can also greatly affect character strength depending on where you are. For example, Yoshimitsu on to Descent in Subconsciousness is much, much stronger than if he's playing on, well, really any stage without a floor break. Having access to 2 floor breaks when Yoshimitsu has something like his Dragonfly 3+4 is incredible. Being able to mix up his mid-heat engager from Dragonfly, which he can do off of stuff like 3 slide 4, up forward 3+4, and moves like that, to be able to mix that heat engager with his 3+4 for full combo is crazy strong. But even again, when it comes back to matchups, think of a matchup like Bryan versus Zafina. If you have a matchup like Bryan versus Zafina, Zafina is going to be much, much stronger on a more open stage like Coliseum or Yakushima. And Bryan is going to be much weaker because of the lack of floor break and the lack of wall, 2 areas where he excels in. But if we take that same Descent as a Consciousness example, you put Bryan on that stage against Zafina, and Bryan is going to have a huge advantage. You add on top of that Tekken World 2 rules where stage selecting has to be random, and you also add on top of that how strong stages are depending on the character and how much they can influence how strong a character is. And in a tournament setting, really, character placement is completely random. How strong a character is going to be when you're going into a game versus your opponent is very dependent on the stage. A character that you're playing can go from, depending on the matchup, the 23rd best character in the game to the 11th based on the stage that you get on that random select going into game 1. You add on top of that how you're unable to select a stage if you lose, and the game in this regard just becomes completely random. Whether this is Bandai Namco's intention or not, I don't know. But this is just how it is, and I think that these factors combined makes character placement and ordering characters in this game a completely useless exercise, and frankly just impossible to do. There's way too much randomness in this game, there's way too much variability in this game, and one of the major reasons for that comes from Tekken World 2 rules on stage selection and random stage selection that frankly I think needs to be changed going into Season 2. Besides that, we also have only 2 tiers here. These factors are the reasons why there are only 2 tiers. Not only do I think that balance is fairly good and there's not a lot of difference between characters that are in, say, A+ tier and A tier, which is kind of the reason why you have the tiers like that. But I also think because of that variability and how much they can go up or down a tier just based on stage, let alone matchups, that there really are 2 tiers. There's like the really, really strong characters that are up there, and then there's the characters that are alright, but not as strong as the characters that go all the way up there. Breaking down the tiers, we have the absolute best characters. I think Nina and Yoshimitsu don't really need much of an explanation. We have characters that are going to be easy and strong. We have characters that are strong, but they're not going to be strong like after a month of playing them. You really have to get familiar with the character and play them a lot in order for them to be able to compete with other characters up here like Paul and Claudio and Kuma and the likes of them. Then you have the second lower tier here where you have characters that are really good but not top tier. These are characters where the ceiling doesn't really affect where they're going to be, or they just don't have a very high ceiling in general. And then you have characters that really you're not going to be able to play in a tournament setting at all unless you are able to play them very well. You're either a legacy player with these characters, or you've just put a lot of time and effort into them and you truly main these characters. So moving on to talk about individual characters, let's talk about the absolute best, which is Yoshimitsu and Nina. Yoshimitsu is my main, if you don't know, before I started playing Lidia, and I actually made a video back in March of last year outlining why I thought Yoshimitsu was the best character in the game, and that video aged like fine wine. If you want my opinions on why I think Yoshi's up here and his strengths, refer to that video even though it's a year old. I think pretty much everything from that video still holds up, and yes, I'm absolutely going to brag about being multiple months ahead of the pro players on Yoshimitsu. Nina is a character that I don't think really requires any explanation. I think that one part about Nina that's important to point out is that she doesn't have a lot of tournament representation, despite everyone saying that she's very strong, and of course she is very strong. really the only person playing her consistently at the top is Ash. There are, of course, a couple other people, but when you go in the top 8s at major tournaments, the only Nina player you're really seeing is Ash, which I think goes to show that Nina isn't a character that you can just pick up, mash down forward 1-2, and then get top 8 at EVO with. It's a similar thing to Yoshimitsu. Yes, we have seen a couple of pocket picks with Yoshimitsu, but those are more here and there. Generally speaking, you're going to be seeing people like iMusician, Sin, Kanan Trench, people that are character loyalists with Yoshi that have been playing him for many, many, many years are going to be making top 8 with him. It's not someone who just picked up Yoshimitsu in Tekken 8 and is mopping the floor of everyone throughout the tournament. And I think that makes these characters being at the top of the list healthy. There are always going to be characters that are in top 10. For some reason, Tekken players complain about characters being in top 10 and think that every top 10 character should be absolutely gutted. I don't believe in that, because at that point, then you're always asking for characters to get gutted. And I think that if you have a top 10, all of those characters should be strong. I think that Akuma, for example, in Tekken 7 being top 10 was fine because his execution barrier and requirement was so monumentally high that only a couple of people in the world that can do it. And when I say a couple, I do mean only 3 or 4 people total in the world could do it. And I think the people that were able to do that should be rewarded for it. If they put in that amount of effort with a character that has that kind of skill ceiling, they should be playing a top 10 character at that point. However, I think it also goes without saying that these characters are absolutely overtuned. Yoshimitsu obviously has things that are absolutely ridiculous, like Sword Sweep. Listen, I'm a Yoshi player. I know the Yoshi players want to tell you to just react to it and hotkick. It's really difficult. It's something you can realistically only do offline, and even then it's hard. Nina has stuff like down forward 1-2, free mix-ups, free just screw neutral tools, jab checks that she can just throw out on a whim, and there are things that should be toned down about them, but I think generally speaking, tier-wise, they're in a good spot for the difficulty that they offer, and with a couple of adjustments to get rid of those really dumb tools that you don't really need to strive for the ceiling for it to use well, I should say, sorry about that. I think they're in a pretty good spot. Moving on now to the easy and strong characters, I don't think that any of these characters are really much of a surprise. Jin, of course, is up here because he's Jin. He's generally considered like even top 3 by today's standards. Sometimes top 5, universally pretty much a top 10 character. Now that said, Jin is similar in the same way of Yoshimitsu and Nina, where he does have a high skill ceiling, and you can definitely tell a difference between a legacy Jin player and someone who started out with Jin in Tekken 8. And if you are a legacy Jin player and you are able to play at his skill ceiling, he absolutely becomes stronger. Jin is not normally what I would consider an easy character, and I think that he certainly has a high skill ceiling, but at the end of the day, I think that it's undeniable that Jin's skill floor, if you pick him up from playing him for a month, you can absolutely play him as a top tier character. That's why he's in here, even though it does take a lot of effort to truly achieve his skill ceiling, and really strong proficient Jin players are very impressive, but just with how he is in Tekken 8, I'm sure most of the Jin players here can agree, he is pretty easy to be able to achieve these top tier results. King, I don't believe, needs really any explanation. Law is a character that actually, back in the day, if you're new to Tekken 7, used to be one of the hardest, most skill-intense characters in the entire game. And then they neutered him and gutted him by getting rid of the execution on DSS, and now he's kind of an easy brain-dead character. And the sad part about it is that even the really strong legacy Law mains, you can't tell much of a difference between them and people that just started in Tekken 8. Even with Jin, you can tell a difference between really strong Jin players and fairly new Jin players, but Law is kind of the same and they all blend in, and it's very unfortunate where he's ended up. I think they really did a disservice with Law. I think he's one of the single worst designed characters in this game because of how much they gutted him and they removed so much of the legacy skill and the things that made Law fun in the past. But at the end of the day, that's how he is. Hopefully, maybe they'll change stuff in season 2 to make him more interesting and more fun and bring him back to where he was. But unfortunately, this is just how he's kind of ended up now. Moving on to Paul. Paul is also a really interesting one because Paul, I think you could make an argument, could go in any single one of these tiers. Paul is surprisingly difficult. He is not the brain-dead easy beginner's character that a lot of people make him out to be. He really lacks in fundamental tools. The way that he approaches neutral situations is not very roundabout. He clearly has glaring weaknesses, and you can't transfer a lot of skills from one Tekken character into Paul like you could between, I don't know, say Reina and Feng. Paul definitely has a ceiling and even a floor, and it's really difficult to judge where exactly Paul goes. My opinion is that he is at the highest level, strong enough to be able to hang out up at the top over here, but really I can see an argument for why he might be down here, and because of his linear game plan and the way that he goes about maneuvering the neutral and his atypical tools, I could even see him being here or even here. So Paul's a bit of a weird one. I settled on putting him in easy and strong because I think that if you spend a little bit of time with Paul, those quirks that he has, you can get over fairly quickly and you can make him a very strong character. But he does have execution, he does have weird tools, he does have a weird game plan, and I can see him being an argument for him being kind of anywhere. Claudio, I don't think we need to talk about. Dragunov, we definitely don't need to talk about. Kuma. Now, you're going to notice that Panda isn't on this list. Kuma, we don't need to talk about, but Panda, we should talk about a little bit. A lot of people say that because Kuma is so high, Panda is bottom tier, or people just say Panda is bottom tier in general. Personally, I think that's kind of bullshit. I think that bears in general are really strong, and the thing that makes Kuma top tier isn't just his heat, although his heat does help and it is objectively better than Panda, but the general tools that bears have. Obviously, mid-heat engager armor move is really nice. They have strong mix-ups. Even on block, the amount of chip damage bears do are absurd. Bears can get a ton of chip damage off, even outside of heat. He doesn't have to be in heat, and he's really the only character that can get the kind of chip damage that he does in heat, and all of these things transfer over to Panda too. The only thing that makes Panda worse than Kuma is, of course, the heat stuff. But Panda's heat stuff is still fine. Even if it's not as good as Kuma's electric and his heat smash being 13 frames, it's still serviceable. It's still fine. There are a bunch of other characters that certainly have worse things that they do in heat, like Lee, for example. So Panda's fine. I think Panda is in the same tier here as Kuma, but I removed Panda from the list because, frankly, Panda's kind of redundant because Kuma exists. But I don't think that Panda belongs down here. I don't think Panda is significantly worse than Kuma. I think they're roughly the same, but Kuma is objectively better. Now, when it comes to Shaheen, Shaheen is another character that definitely has a high skill ceiling while standing 3 loops. That's something that Shaheen players talk about all the time, and I can absolutely empathize and I can understand. But Shaheen's a character where I believe that he's very simple in a lot of what he does. He has a very simple game plan. His basic execution is fairly simple. He doesn't need a lot to be able to really excel. Those hard things that you learn about Shaheen, if you are able to do them, are very nice and they definitely stand out, but I don't think that's very important to making Shaheen a very strong character. And then lastly, Alisa, who's my other main, who I desperately hope gets nerfed in Season 2. I do not believe that Alisa is top 10 for the first thing. I never have. This is a common cycle with Alisa, and when I'm going to explain this to you, you're going to notice it too. This even goes back to Tekken 7. Every single season, Alisa gets a buff. People say that she's top 10. Even in Season 4, I think, of Tekken 7, people were saying that she was top 5, and then over the course of the season she drops down the mid-tier because she's just not as strong as people say, whether it's just people on Twitter or Reddit or the pros or main man content creators, and she doesn't see any real tournament participation. She just kind of fades into obscurity, and then a new season comes in and everyone says that she's top 5, and then again she drops off. And this is the same thing that happened in Tekken 8. This is the Alisa paradox, where she is simultaneously a mid-tier character and a top 5 character, and this happens every single season. Will this happen in season 2? I don't know, because chances are Alisa's actually going to get nerfed. But also with the changes to chip damage in Heat, her chip damage is actually going to stand out from our characters because it's going to get overall buffed. What's the reason for that? It's because when she's in DES, she does multiple hits that do 1 to 2 damage on block. She's not doing, like Kuma, one big hit that's doing, say, 17 chip damage. She's instead doing 5 hits each that are doing 1 to 2 chip damage, adding up to like 10, 15, or whatever it is off of something like Forward 1. So the universal changes to the reduction in the amount of chip damage in Heat actually aren't going to affect her at all. And you can see this even now if you put the opponent into rage, and you do, say, again, Alisa's Forward 1 on block, the amount of chip damage that you're going to be doing to the opponent is roughly the same, actually. And because of that, she's gonna kinda in some ways get buffed, and she's going to stand out even more for her chip damage than she does now. So where is she going to end up in season 2? I don't know. It's hard to say, but what I do know from the past is that she's probably going to be considered top 10, maybe even top 5, and then drop off in the mid tier. Again, that's kind of what's happened here. I still think that Alisa is pretty strong. She has some really good tools, and she has a lot of things that are frankly really brain dead too. I've always been a contender that Alisa is a character with a very high skill ceiling. That's why I played her along with Yoshimitsu back in Tekken 7, and that's also why people like iMusician play her too. iMusician also mains Alisa and Yoshimitsu, and the reason for that is because she has a very interesting, unorthodox playstyle and a very high skill ceiling with a lot of tools that are very unique and fun to utilize. The problem is that she has moves that are extremely strong and overtuned, like down 4, for instance, that make all of those interesting and unique tools completely irrelevant and frankly kind of a liability. You couple that with the game's system, and you're forced with Alisa to kind of use only 2 or 3 moves, go in the DES, and then mix up from DES. It's a very boring and frankly really brain dead playstyle. That said, when I do face really strong Alisas online, I can definitely tell the difference, and she still retains that skill ceiling. I'm actually very impressed with a lot of Alisa players, at least at the God of Destruction level, because they are, for the most part, very competent and very strong players. Even in the past in Tekken 7, Alisa players used to be kind of brain dead and throwing out some of the dumbest moves I've ever seen at, like, even Tekken Emperor rank, like 2-3-4, sorry, or like 1-2-2, or back 3+4 moves like that, but I don't really see that anymore, which is quite nice. At the end of the day, I think that Alisa is really strong, really overtuned, definitely needs some nerfs, but she's not top 10 like people say. And throughout this whole thing, if you don't believe me with where Alisa's placement has been, go ahead and look back at initial new season tier lists for Tekken 7. You look at tier lists for season 2, season 3, season 4, and you will in pretty much all of them see Alisa in top 10. And then you look at lists for the end of the season and she goes to mid tier. It's the same thing that happened in Tekken 8, and we might be seeing that in season 2 as well. So that's just something to look out for. Moving on now to the next tier. These are characters that are strong but takes a good pilot. These are characters that are generally either considered, say, low tier, like Lidia, or are characters that really require a lot of effort and legacy skill, like Xiaoyu, to make them shine. And I don't believe that any of these characters here you can pick up and play for like a month and see them as a really strong top tier character. But if you put enough time and effort into them, you can really make them a really big threat and have people see them as a real top tier character. Now, my opinion on this is that characters that are in top 10 should of course be strong, and I think based on at least my opinion of this, for the most part, characters that do have a really high skill ceiling and even to some extent a high skill floor, although I don't think skill floor is really relevant in Tekken 8 because I think pretty much every character is kind of easy. I think that that's a healthy thing for the game to have, and for most characters that have that kind of skill ceiling are very strong. There are only a couple of characters that you see over here that don't really fit the bill. At the same time, some people might say that if a character requires a lot of effort to be top tier, then maybe they're not top tier. That I'm going to leave up to you, whether you think that these characters, because they need a good pilot to be strong, should be in the same tier or not. That's completely up to you. In my opinion, it does warrant them being in the same tier. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had characters like Akuma at top 1 in Tekken 7, right? But at the end of the day, that's pretty subjective. I don't think there's one right or wrong answer. I can just give you my opinion, but I'll leave it to you on what you think, where you think these should be in relation to the other characters that are in this tier. But we're going to start with Lidia, of course, my main. I don't want to hop on too much about Lidia, especially because this is a general video, and I imagine that there are going to be quite a few people watching right now that aren't Lidia mains or aren't here for my normal Lidia content. I made a video on why I think that Lidia is a top 10 character, and in reality, I think Lidia hovers somewhere between 10th place and 14th place. But of course, titling a video, I think Lidia is number 12 on the tier list, it isn't as catchy and doesn't get as much attention as saying that Lidia is top 10. And that's not to say I don't think she is top 10. I genuinely do think that she can compete there. But with Lidia, it requires a lot of effort. Lidia is by far one of the hardest characters in the game. There's a reason why everyone says that she's bottom tier, and it's because a lot of Lidia players rely on that casino gameplay, which is awful. I can give you my own personal anecdote, Frosty Faustings, if you don't know. Hi, I'm Seth, I'm a Lidia player, and I got 13th place at Frosty Faustings this year, and I put King Ray Jr. into losers. So the thing is, when I did that with Lidia, I went through the entire tournament without using Heaven and Earth 1+2 a single time. I did not use Lydia's mix-up once, and I got 13th place. And on one hand, that's just how my playstyle is with Lidia, but on the other hand, I think it speaks a lot to what I've constantly been harping on, that Lydia's casino gameplay is bad. And with how well that King Ray Jr. knows the Lidia matchup because he plays against XO all the time, I think that's definitive proof that not only my playstyle works, but if I used the casino style gameplay, I would have just lost. I would have gotten the losers in pools. I wouldn't have been able to beat King Ray Jr. And the real misconception when it comes to Lidia is that even at pro play, people really like to use the casino gameplay with Lidia because no one knows how to actually deal with it. I can give you another personal anecdote of mine. I do viewer games every week, and because I'm very adamant on teaching people the matchup and how to deal with Lidia, I play against viewers who are Tekken King that give me more trouble than pro players that I've played against. I don't want to say any specific names, but if you've seen some of the people that I've played against online, I've played against real pro players that are very active in tournaments and do extremely well. And I have an easier time playing against them than some of my own viewers who aren't even at God of Destruction, simply because of how well they know the matchup. And to add on top of that, I'm not even doing a lot of the time casino style gameplay with Lidia. I'm not going in the horse and just forcing a mix-up, which is why I brought up the whole thing with Heaven and Earth 1+2. In fact, it's not only that, but I think that you could remove Heaven and Earth 1+2 from the game and Lidia would not change in tiers. Really, I think it's more of a playstyle thing and a matchup knowledge thing than anything why Lidia is not only considered a casino character, but also why she's considered low tier. Because despite people not even knowing how to deal with the matchup, including pro players, who I had say to my face at Frosty Faustings, people that are pros that are sponsored, that got like top 20 at Frosty Faustings, that they just don't know this matchup. So don't just take it from me. I've had people say it directly to me that they don't know how to deal with this character. And frankly, I think that a lot of the rhetoric is because of just ignorance on the matchup. And further, because of that ignorance, you even see people at God of Destruction who are using Lidia as just a 50-50 casino character, especially if they're playing her as a secondary character. And that playstyle, frankly, just doesn't work. She has some of the worst mix-ups, the worst 50-50s in the entire game. And again, I think my testament on not using Heaven and Earth 1+2 a single time at Frosty Faustings contends to that. even despite that, people will still say that she's B tier. So, you know, if people actually knew to sidestep right duck horse stance, then this character would just be considered unviable. The playstyle simply doesn't work. And I can also give you another anecdote of mine that for the most part, if I play against a Lidia player online, they are the most free game that I will ever play. Playing against some God of Destruction Lidias, and I don't have any specific names, of course, in this case, and I don't want anyone to feel bad, but this is just me being genuine. Some Tekken God to God of Destruction Lidias that I play against are easier to beat than some Bushin players, just because they rely so much on the casino 50-50 style, because no one knows how to deal with it, and then they just get completely shut down, they don't know what to do, and they die. You add on top of that people saying that Lidia's neutral is generally bad and she only has hidden 50-50s, which is not true at all. Her neutral is some of the best in the game, and I think that there's a big misconception with her based on people's playstyle, people not really knowing the matchup, and just general ignorance on how the character works. I think that Lidia, when you play at her ceiling, you got people like me, Exo, Tetsu, and a bunch of other really strong Lidia players that are really striving to learn the character's neutral, to not rely on that gimmicky casino gameplay, not just relying on people having lack of matchup knowledge, but truly trying to be strong with the character and make her work. She becomes a very, very powerful character, and I think most Lidia players that play like that, whether it's me, Rainbow Neos, or some others, would agree with that statement. Now, would everyone agree that she's top 10 like I've been saying? No, and a lot of people say that I'm taking crazy pills when I say that, but I think for the most part in the Lidia community, people that really know this character, have a handle on this character, and are strong with this character would agree with me that she definitely belongs in this tier, and she is a top tier character, and she is not bottom 10 or bottom 5 like a lot of people, including pro players, say. Now, moving on from that, Reina, you know, there are a lot of really strong Reina players that make her stand out. Yagami is, of course, the biggest example, and seeing really strong Reina players is cool. I said Lidia, that's so funny. It's very cool though. It's nice to see a character that comes across as being the beginner Mishima, I say in quotes, but actually is really interesting and has a high ceiling. But that said, she definitely struggles in a lot of areas. I think that's undeniable. But when you see people like Yagami playing Reina, and it's of course not just Yagami, there are a lot of other really strong Reina players as well that make her seem like an absolute demon. It makes her stand out, and I believe that when you have people that are just really maining Reina, trying to achieve her ceiling, and you see a Reina player like that, and you know that there's something special. There's something special going on here. And I think because of that, Reina's in a good spot. You know, generally speaking, she's kind of the same as Lidia, although she's seen as a little bit better than Lidia. She's generally seen as, say, mid-tier. But when you have a good Reina pilot, that character is so absurd to deal with. And that's cool. I think that's really neat. Moving on to Kazuya, in a similar vein now, we got the Mishima family here. Kazuya has definitely gotten a lower skill floor over time, and that's intentional. Kazuya is one of the most popular characters in the game, and they have steadily over time since Tekken 7, throughout seasons, and now in the Tekken 8, have made him easier and easier to pick up and play. And I think that a lot of the skill ceiling and the creativity and a lot of the things that make Kazuya players stand out from newer Kazuya players is gone. Things like crouch dash 1+2 just fix so many of his problems. Increased tracking was things like electric in Tekken 7, and continuing to have really strong tracking that was previously a weakness, because he can just crouch dash 1+2 and then like electric or do down forward 1, that's just going to track if you try sidestepping left, really reduces from a lot of the unique aspects that the character has at the highest level, and I think that's a bit of a shame. But I also can't deny that it's Kazuya still. And if at the end of the day you're doing, say, crouch dash 1+2 into electric and you're catching someone sidestepping, That's going to stand out a lot more and make the character stronger than if you're doing crouch dash 1+2 and a down forward 1, right? It's similar situation with Lidia where, like, yeah, Lidia can, in theory, do, like, heaven and earth 2 and then, like, down forward 2 is a frame trap, but then you can, like, sidestep it in this counterplay. But if you have a really strong Lidia player that's doing 1 frame links with heaven and earth 2 and then forward 2, which is very execution heavy, of course, it's about the same as doing perfect electric in terms of execution, although it is a little bit easier, of course, but it's kind of the same thing, then that player stands out. And it also makes dealing with the character a lot easier because now all of a sudden you have just less options and you're putting yourself at more risk if you try to choose an option. And it's the same with Kazuya when you do like electrics or Waivu and you approach a neutral and stuff like that. So anyway, he's here. I don't think we need to talk any more about it. Xiaoyu as well. Some people say that Xiaoyu is not a hard character. I think those people are insane. I think they need to go to an asylum. I think they need to seek mental help. If you think that Xiaoyu is easy, then I will call an ambulance and I will pay for it with my insurance because I want what's best for you. I want you to get help and I want you to get better. Moving on to Hwoarang. Hwoarang has... I think a lot of the stigma around Hwoarang back in Tekken 7 is faded, and a lot of people do see this character as being difficult, which he truly is. I mean, yeah, can you just go online and you can just hit buttons and, like, even going in the Fujin, you can probably succeed with Hwoarang. Sure, but he's not going to be strong, right? There are going to be a lot of holes, there are going to be a lot of gaps, there are going to be problems, and even though Hwoarang has some absurd things, which we'll talk about in a second, it takes a really good pilot to be able to play him at the highest level. And I think that's why a lot of Hwoarang players say that he's not strong, because he does require effort to be able to be strong. And if you can have a reason for your character not being strong, I think a lot of people latch onto that. And it's not just Hwoarang, of course. I mean, there are a bunch of other characters and a bunch of player bases where you can say that same thing. I'm not trying to single out Hwoarang plays. I just think that's how it is. But if we just look at the character where he is, when you look at some of the best Hwoarang players, he's very strong. And you can look at Edge as an example and how he succeeded at Tekken World Tour. And that really brings out just how absurd this character can be. Speaking of absurd, he also has like the best counter hit launcher in the game. He has one of the best lows in the game. Yeah, he has a low that's -1 on block and puts you in a mix-up situation on block. There's no other low in the game that does that. His mix-ups are really good, and his lows are really good. His approach is really good. His heat smash is tracking, and again, you saw that Tekken World Tour where people would sidestep the first hit, and then the second hit they would just have to hold it. The third hit is the one that's a high, so you can't do anything about, which is just great. He has a lot of absurd tools, and at the same time, because he has so many choices and he has so many things to do, being able to choose the right thing is difficult. He even has a bug, which I've noticed Hwoarang players doing more recently. I don't know if it's recently been discovered or what, where he goes into southpaw and then runs forward, and he's able to do armored shoulder tackle from like range 2. That's probably going to be something that gets fixed in season 2, but it's just a free +13 armor move that he can do for free that you can't even get grabbed out of. It's crazy, and I think that single-handedly perpetuates him way up. Steve has been through the ringer throughout this game's history. He's been up, he's been down, he's here. You know, at the end of the day, Steve's a difficult character, but he's good. He's pretty good. I think that they fleshed out a lot of the problems he has. Not everything is, of course, but a lot of the problems he has are kind of fleshed out. And I think if you have a really strong Steve player, he's very scary. Feng, I honestly want to put in easy and strong. Feng is underrated. Feng is the same thing as people were talking about in Tekken 7, and frankly, I don't know what people say this character is nowadays, but back in Tekken 7, people were saying Feng was like mid-tier for 4 years, and then one person picked up Feng Wei and was like, wait, Fishhook is kind of insane, and then overnight he became a top 10 character for the rest of the game's life, and people were like, why didn't we see this coming? And I think it's the same thing in Tekken 8. He has a lot of absurd tools, he has great lows, he has great pokes, and what I hear other pro players saying, I can't remember who exactly I heard this from, but it was on some Tekken podcast, is that he doesn't have a true 50-50, and first off, yes he does, but second off, does that really matter? Does it matter if you just get forced into a free stance 50-50? When you have such good pokings, you have good safe launchers, you have good counter hit tools, you have good movement tools. Personally, I don't think so. Now, the reason why I have Feng in takes a good pilot instead of easy and strong is because what I've heard from Feng players is that he requires a good pilot to be able to play well. Do I believe that? Not for a second, but frankly, I don't see the character and I don't know the character, so I'm going to take their word on it just in case I'm wrong. The reason why I don't believe that too is because that's what Feng players said back in Tekken 7. Anyway, moving on to Lee. This character and his mains are obnoxious. They are the most toxic shitheads in the entire game. I think that all of the Miguel players moved on to play Lee. I don't know what it is, but I'm not exaggerating when I say more than 50% of the time I come across a Lee online in quick match, because I don't play ranked, it's only in quick match. They either teabag, they keep charge, or they come into my chat to say some shit. It's not even send me a friend request and try doing that. They will type in my name, try to find my stream, and then just start talking shit, and then also make multiple Twitch and YouTube accounts so they go across platforms to continuously say the same thing, pretending that they're a different person, but they are uncreative morons that only have one insult in their list of like insults that they have sitting on their desk, so they can only come up with one thing because the shared IQ between all Lee mains is about 3. I don't know what it is with Lee and Lee players, but they are some of the most toxic shitheads in the entire Tekken community, and frankly, anything I can do to piss them off in a video like this, like saying that Lee is strong, is going to make me sleep better at night, because I know that they're going to be crying themselves to sleep, and frankly, when it comes to Lee, a lot of them are bullies, and you get what you fucking deserve. But at the same time, I think that Lee is very underrated, and Lee players kind of said the same thing back in Tekken 7, even let's be honest, he was top tier. Even after the nerfs in Tekken 7 that he got to like Acid Rain. Remember when he could launch off of Acid Rain? And then Lee players were complaining about that and said that he was mid-tier in Tekken 7 when he could launch off of Acid Rain. And then when that got nerfed, he's bottom 2. I don't like using the word downplay. I don't think that the word downplay is very constructive to discussion. And I think it's fairly hostile of a term, and is just dismissive of what people think about their character. And frankly, most of the time, if you don't play the character, the people that main the character are going to know better than you, right? And being open to listening to what mains of the character have to say about their character, I think is really important for this discussion. It's constructive, and I don't think we should dismiss those people by saying that they're just downplaying the character. All of that said, Lee players downplay their character like no other fucking character I've seen in the entirety of the FGC. Moving on to Bryan. Bryan is easy. Let me get that out of the way. Skill floor, like at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The people saying that Bryan is hard to pick up and play are out of their minds. You know what? Actually, I didn't record a lot of footage of me getting to Tekken King with Bryan, but I do have one clip that I can show you, which I'm going to show you now on screen. You're looking at it. This is how I got to Tekken King with Bryan. It was this. I didn't know a single combo with Bryan. I didn't even look at Bryan's move list. All I did was jab, 1-2, 1-2-1. You notice how those 3 moves are all one move? That's how little I use. I actually have to pad out the amount of moves I did with Bryan. 1-2-3, not even 1-2-4, just 1-2-3, because I don't even know how to use heat with Bryan. I don't know how to use any of Bryan's heat moves. Hatchet kick, core circle 4, 1+2, and orbital. That's it. Those are the moves I used. I didn't use core circle back 1. Core circle back 1 was actually too advanced and too big brain for how I was playing Bryan. And I got to Tekken King with him with what, like a 70% win rate or something? Bryan was probably the easiest character that I got to Tekken King, and I've got about 11 characters to Tekken King. No. Clive would be the easiest. I'd say Bryan was the second easiest. Bryan's skill floor is greatly over-exaggerated. I know that main man says that Bryan is like the pinnacle of difficulty in Tekken 8, and I think even at one point he said that if you're like a Tekken King, you wouldn't be able to get the Fujin with Bryan. You can if you just do 1-2-1. That's all you need to do. Just jab and 1-2-1 and you can get to Tekken King, no problem. It's super easy. But all of that said, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight Bryan's very high skill ceiling and his execution requirements off of stuff like taunt, and even with sways, you know, I mean, Bryan is a character that you can't do easy curry and backdash input with. You can't input buffers, sways like hatchet kick and such. I think that there are a lot of things that have made him a lot easier and have filled a lot of the gaps that made him difficult in Tekken 7, not only because this playstyle kind of rewards a lot of brain dead stuff like throwing out hatchet kick and 1-2-1 and stuff, but also they gave him moves like core circle back 1 that just fixed the biggest problem he had, which was approaching neutral, and now he can do that no problem for free, and he gets a ton of advantage off of it. So pretty much all of the things that made Bryan have his high skill floor are gone, but I think most of the things that make Bryan have a high skill ceiling are still there, and Bryan is much scarier if you have someone that can actually do a taunt back 4 than someone who can't at the wall. So yeah, Bryan's up here. Heihachi is a similar vein. I got Heihachi to Tekken Emperor without knowing how to do an electric. I don't play Mishimas. I don't know how to wave dash. I don't know how to do an electric. And somehow I still got Heihachi to Tekken Emperor before I just got sick of playing him. Again, skill floor, greatly exaggerated. And this is one of the reasons I see that every character in this game is kind of easy. I'm not putting him here because I think he has a high skill floor. Absolutely not. Heihachi's skill floor is absurdly low. He just like stance mix up the character. You know, he does like 4-3 and then on hit, he does 1-1. If the opponent is sidestepping, people will say he's linear. House sweep and 4-3 are both basically homing moves. On top of him already having strong homing moves like his avoiding the puddle and back 3. On top of that, moves like up forward 2 also can track the opponent's sidestep, and they're hit confirmable heat engages that are safe on block with the first hit, and they're so hit confirmable a toddler could do it. There are a lot of things that do make make Heihachi fairly easy at the beginner level, but I can tell you this, if I played Heihachi for a month without knowing how to play Mishimas, I wouldn't bring in the tournament. I could play him at a competent enough level where I could get God of Destruction with him, sure. I know I could do that easy. All I need to do is 1-2-2, 1-1-2, I play Lidia. 4-3s, up 4-2s, like throwing a house sweep every now and then. I don't even need to use electric, and that is how I got in the Tekken Emperor, but I mean, he's Heihachi, you know, and he does have problems, like how he approaches neutral. He doesn't have a lot of good neutral approach tools, right? You have to be smart with how you do that. Wave dashing is super important with Heihachi. Being able to whiff punish with electric with how much damage he outputs, even if it is very overtuned, you're not going to be able to get that damage if you can't do electric as a whiff punish. You know what I mean? So that's why I think Heihachi's here. I think Heihachi is pretty good. And, you know, he's Heihachi. He even though he's kind of brain dead, he still has a very high ceiling, and really good Heihachi players definitely stand out. And finally, Victor. Now, I think Victor has a similar problem as Lidia. Victor is the weirdest one to be in strong, but takes a good pilot for sure. And let me briefly explain why. The biggest problem is his Hwoarang 2 change. His Hwoarang 2 in the stance, compared to what was before, frankly, I think is a buff. A lot of high-level pro players, I believe, share this sentiment. You saw about a month or two after Victor got those nerfs, there were a lot of people putting him in top 10. And even though that's not the case anymore, I think generally speaking, he's considered top tier. But he also relies on a good knowledge of how to utilize your stances. You have a lot of moves out of your stances to use, you have a lot of stance cancels, and it requires good reads, good fundamental knowledge, and kind of getting in the head of your opponent, because they are risky, they are very unsafe. So what a lot of Victor players do is they'll just do something like Hwoarang 2, take the +2, and then just kind of work with that. But if you're really trying to achieve something, Victor's skill ceiling, you have to be able to be willing to take risks and mitigate those risks by having good reads and just generally some good fundamental knowledge and good character knowledge. And those things really encompass Victor being a top tier character. Now, that said, doing that with Victor isn't hard by any means. He is not in here for the same reasons as every other character being on this tier. Rather, Victor is here because I think that if you're just starting out with Victor and playing him, he's like here. And maybe some people would argue he's here, but I think you need a little bit of effort to make him that top tier character that a lot of people say that he is. If you don't do that and you just pick him up, you play him as a secondary, he's here. So he's a very weird character, but I can understand the effort that Victor remains go through to be able to make him strong, and I think because of that, in order to put him at this point, you do have to spend a bit of time with the character. Okay, moving on from that, the really good but not top tier characters. These are going to be characters that generally don't have a very high skill ceiling, and even if they do, it's not going to really affect their placement from being down here versus up here. No matter how strong you are with the character, generally they're just going to remain in the same place. I don't think Jack really needs much of an explanation. June definitely has some things that make her quite a bit better if you spend some time with the character, but at the end of the day, whatever the case, she's weak. Even if you do have those couple of things that June mains are going to do better than non-June mains, it's not really going to bump her up. Kind of the same with Lars, where you can definitely tell the difference between a really good Lars player and a not so good Lars player, but does that really make him that much stronger? Not so much. Leroy, I kind of feel the same. Lili, I think that of all of the characters in here, she is probably the closest to being in the hard to play well. And I also think that there's a point where Lili could be strong, but I also think that one of her problems is matchups. Right? I think that there are some matches where Lili obviously excels in, like Lidia, but at the same time, I can take a step back and recognize that there are just some situations, some characters where she's going to kind of struggle. She has some problems with consistency, and she does still have to take risks regardless of the strengths that she has. And she's definitely a weird one. I could see her also being in the strong tier, but I don't think she really contests with the characters up here. Eddy was a character that I would in the past in Tekken 7 put down here without question. But, I mean, come on. Are we really seeing much of a difference between Legacy Eddy players and Tekken 8 Eddy players? Actually, are there any Legacy Eddy players even left with what they did to this character? Frankly, whoever designed this character and came up with the idea, they should just get rid of everything Eddy has and make him this rush down 50-50 character, should be put in jail. The single worst redesign in the entire game outside of Law, a complete failure of a character. If you are an Eddy player and you enjoy this rendition of Eddy, I feel nothing but happiness for you. I'm glad that you do, but for everyone else, I'm so sorry that this is what they did to him. It's a damn shame, and I think it's frankly insulting because Eddy doesn't really have much of a ceiling anymore. I play against God of Destruction Eddies, and they just kind of the same as like Bushin Eddies. They don't do anything special. They all kind of play him the same because there's only 3 moves that you do. You do a move, you go in the stance, you do the stance mix-up. That's it. He doesn't have much else that he can do, and that's a crying shame. It's really sad. Clive is also an interesting one because I think Clive is actually a little bit underrated. I think there's an argument to be made that Clive can still be considered strong even after the nerfs. The biggest problem with Clive is that a lot of people don't know how to actually like deal or play Clive because Clive is a zoner. Clive is a zoner in Tekken. Stuff like his back 1+2, back 2, and even Phoenix stance makes him as kind of this weird hybrid zoner rushdown character. And that's weird. That's weird for Tekken players because Tekken players don't play fighting games. Me, I play Soul Calibur, so I pick up Clive, I get him to God of Destruction with an 80% win rate on day 2. Funny. But what I was doing to do that, I wasn't even doing the stuff that got nerfed. I mean, yeah, I was using back 1+2 a lot, but I was using that at a range where people couldn't actually punish it because I was using it as a zoning tool. I didn't use forward 1+2 at all. I kind of forgot the move existed. What I was doing to get Clive to God of Destruction was I was doing Phoenix mix-ups from long range, I was zoning the opponent out, I was stopping the approach with stuff like back 2, and I wasn't doing these weird frame traps with like down back 4 trying to fish for a launcher. I was just like, you know what? Let's just do like Phoenix 4 to get the heat engager, or Phoenix 1+2 or Phoenix 2 to keep it a little bit faster and safer depending on the move you go into it. Go in the heat and then just blow all of my heat on all these plus on block moves like Phoenix 2 1+2 and down forward 1-1-2 and force the mix-ups that way with the house sweep and stuff. And that got me into God of Destruction with an 8% win rate. None of the stuff I just talked about there is stuff that was nerfed with Clive. And I think that if Tekken players like played other fighting games, they would be doing a lot better with Clive. But most Clive players are just playing Tekken, and that's the biggest problem, is that they're playing Tekken and they're not playing Clive. Again, I'm a Soul Calibur player, right? So I'm used to these things. I'm used to characters like Ivy, like Siegfried, characters that have these huge keep out zoning tools that just stop other characters like Talm and Tira, my two mains in Soul Calibur, from being able to approach them or do anything, and how you abuse that stuff. And that's a similar thing to what I did with Clive. And if Clive players pick up on that and start doing that, I think you might see him start rising in the tier list, because I'm gonna be honest, I think he's really slept on and he's still a top tier character. I think he's still a contender for like top 15 slots, but again, Tekken players just don't know how to use Clive because they play Tekken. They don't play fighting games. So if in season 2, of course, it depends on the changes. But I think if there were no changes in season 2, just hypothetically, you give it 6 months and Clive might climb the ranks, or he might be so obscure that no one really plays him. But you got like 2 or 3 Clive plays that you look at and you go, oh my God, this character's kind of a problem. And then finally, the last tier, after recording for about an hour, hopefully I can cut this down a little bit, is the characters that are really good but hard to play well. These are characters that are really only viable if you have some sort of legacy skill with them or you've been playing them a long time. They have faults that most other characters in the game don't. They have a very high skill ceiling, and because of that, if you aren't very proficient with the character, if you're not a legacy player, then the character just, like, frankly isn't going to win you anything. And the first one here is, of course, Raven. I think Raven doesn't need much of an explanation. Raven is 1-0 in this game. He is a very bare bones, basic, torn down character from what he was, where he does a thing, he goes into a stance, he does a stance mix up, and that's it. And being able to milk anything out of that very dry playstyle he has is frankly a miracle. It's like taking some sand from the Sahara Desert, squeezing it, and then getting a drop of water to come out to put into your canteen. There are some people that can do it. There are some great Sahiran wizards that are able to make that happen with Raven, but really it's really difficult, and other characters can just do that, but easier. That's what makes him difficult. And on top of that, because his approach is so linear and so seeable, against someone that knows this matchup, he can't do a whole lot. You know, like, yeah, you might eat the mix up, and that kind of sucks, but then you just move on. And as someone that knows Raven very well, because I used to play Raven when I was younger, I play against Raven players a lot, and most of them I can just shut down very easily. Not just because Lidia is a pretty good matchup against Raven, but also because if you... a lot of what Raven players do with this character is rely on people not knowing the matchup. Again, similar thing to Lidia, right? But in Raven's case, he doesn't have anything to make up for if someone knows the matchup. Lidia, of course, does. Someone knows the Lidia matchup. There are things like someone knows to sidestep duck against Lydia's horse mix-up after forward 2. You know, there are things that you can do with Lidia to counter that. Someone knows the Raven matchup. Like, what is he going to do? You know, like, he still has to take the risks. He still has to make these decisions, whereas a character like Lidia doesn't. That's why she's up here, and that's why he's down here, because he's very committal and he just doesn't do much. Asuka is down here because she's bottom tier. I mean, this kind of goes without saying, you know, like, Asuka isn't inherently a difficult character. I think that goes without saying, but it's just because Asuka is already so bad. If you aren't a proficient legacy Asuka player, then what are you going to do with her in tournament? I mean, come on, let's just be honest. If you don't know where to place your Sabakis, if you are just throwing out while running 1+2 for no reason, if you don't know how to apply your mix-up and get into the opponent's head, what are you doing with her? And the answer is not. You're just not doing anything. Azucena is actually a character I'm quite scared of. I played against a couple of really strong Azucena players. There was, of course, Fusion at Frosty Faustings, and frankly, when I play against Fusion, I was just playing terrible because of a bunch of factors I'm not really going to get into. The first of which is that the setup that we play on the moron combat players destroyed in finals the day before, so there were no headphones and the setup was fucked. But that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother story, which is kind of funny. But yeah, that's the setup we played on. That didn't help, and then I was very nervous. I was fatigued. I got like 5 hours of sleep. I just didn't play very well. But I played against other Azucena players too, like Kilimanjaro, for instance, who are very, very scary with Azucena. I think Azucena is a similar situation as Lidia, where on the surface, the character is seen as pretty weak, but when you have someone that mains the character, she's absurd. And I could see an argument for her being in the same tier as Lidia for the exact same reasons, because, I mean, again, the reasons are a lot of the same, you know? Like, Azucena is a character that kind of goes into stance, has these mix-ups, but then has ways to deal with it, and you don't want to commit too hard, but if you have a good read, then you can destroy the opponent for choosing the wrong option, and that's kind of how she gets out of control, is if you have just a really strong Azucena player that can make really good reads, that can make really good decisions, and after the nerfs, she actually is a fairly interesting character that, unlike Victor being in Takes a Good Pilot, I think actually has a very high skill ceiling, and there's a distinct difference between a really, really good Azucena player and someone who's not. I felt it firsthand, and the character is terrifying. I wish I had more matchup experience with her. But the reason I'm putting her here instead of a strong character is because most Azucena players say that she's not very strong, and I'm gonna take their word for it because I don't play the character, you know, and I don't want to just call them down players because at the end of the day, they know more than me. But what I do know is playing against really good Azucena players like Fusion, like Kilimanjaro, and a couple of others, and this character is terrifying. She really is, and I think that of all of the characters here, she's probably at the top of the list. Besides that, Leo. There's a Leo player at my locals. I know this matchup better than most characters in the game. This character struggles, has problems, has a high execution barrier, and relies a lot on the opponent not knowing the matchup. That said, Leo still has a lot of absurd stuff. Don't get me wrong. But for the most part, Leo is just, like, difficult to pilot, weird game plan, not a whole lot they're doing in Heat, and is very easily counterable. And if you know the side step, like back 1-4, for instance, then what is Leo doing? And there is an answer. You know, there's a lot of things that Leo can do. Leo does have other ways to be able to approach neutral, but frankly, if you're picking up Leo in the similar vein as Asuka, and you're having to put all of that work in to just circumvent someone's sidestepping back 1-4, what are you doing? You know? Devil Jin, I don't think needs much of an explanation. I think that this character is in a weird spot because I think he's stronger than what people say, but he undeniably has problems, and I can see him being bottom 5, and I would also not be surprised if in a couple of months, again, assuming that nothing changes, he would be considered top 20 because someone breaks him open and finds something dumb with him. But he also definitely has a lot of problems that other characters don't have, and I think that just kind of keeps him out of being top tier. I mean, I played against Shadow's Devil Jin, for God's sake, okay? When I put him here, I have played against one of the probably top 5 Devil Jins in the entire world, and he didn't do a lot special with Devil Jin that I haven't seen from other Devil Jins. So he's here. And then Zafina. Finally, last character, Zafina. This is not a weird one because I can see an argument for her being not in the hard to play well, but controlling her stances, understanding when to go in the stance, when not to go in the stance, not just playing this very basic game of do like 1-2 and down forward 1 and down 3 and then backdash requires a little bit more thinking. And I think that if you're just only utilizing that, then again, what are you doing? Why are you playing Zafina? Like, why not play any other character in the game if all you're doing with Zafina is jab and down forward 1? So I think that for the most part, if you're going to play Zafina, you're trying to achieve her skill ceiling, and she has a lot of options. She has a lot of tools. She has a lot of different things she can do, a lot of different approaches to matchups, and that's really cool. She's really interesting in this game, but I think that even if you're able to do that, she's putting herself a lot at risk. She's very committal, and at the end of the day, it's not going to improve her too much in terms of her overall strength. So that's it. That's the list. If you have any opinions on this, if you have anything you could change, please feel free to leave what you think in the comments down below. Thank you for watching through this whole thing, by the way. Also, if you skipped ahead in the video and you're here now, this has been here the entire... You didn't need to skip ahead, Matt. This has been here the entire time. And if you're confused about what this looks like, you should have watched the beginning of the video. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this tier list. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you were at least found my opinions and discussion on this somewhat interesting, and it might spark some discussion or thoughts in you. And again, if you want to leave those thoughts in the comments, please feel free to. I love reading your comments. I'm always happy to see them. To end off this video, I want to compare this final list I have for the end of Season 1 to what my thoughts were almost exactly a year ago. Actually, depending on when this video goes up, it may be exactly a year ago. On the tier list in this game, back like around when the game came out. So here was my month 1 tier list that I got from my own Sesujin Discord, and this was back in March 9th of 2024. And as you can see, like I said in the beginning, you know, I said Yoshimitsu was the best character in the game. That aged very well. One character in top 5 that a lot of people were very confused on was Shaheen. I distinctly remember people thinking that Shaheen was like B tier and wondering what the hell I was on for putting Shaheen so high. That is another thing that I think has aged extremely well. June, of course, got nerfed. She was universally considered top tier, and then she just got bumped down. Feng, I also think aged fairly well as well. I don't know if I'd say he's top 10, but I think more and more people are starting to see that Feng is a fairly strong character. Azucena, of course, got nerfed. That's why she got knocked down. Steve ended up being not top 10, but around here. I never thought the Lionheart thing was much of an issue, and truthfully, I think that even if the Lionheart stance transition and stuff didn't get changed, that a lot more people would be seeing Steve as something more than just a bottom tier character like he's seen today. Xiaoyu being top 10 is another thing I think worked out pretty well. Same with King. Leo, I think, is the biggest miss in my top 10. I think every other character, for the most part, makes sense, and I think was a pretty good guess. Leo is the one that definitely stands out, as I was very wrong about this, but I think for the most part, that's good. Moving on to the A tiers, some other characters stand out here, like Devil Jin, of course. Raven stands out, and even Lars. But I think for the most part, again, this wasn't too bad. You can see that even back then, I wasn't putting Alisa really in top 10, and I don't think there's much argument here. Going down the B tier, Jin was definitely a miss and Law was a miss. The major reason why I put these characters down here is because I valued Heat a little bit too much and what characters could do in Heat. That was the main reason why I had particularly Jin down in B tier instead of A or even top 10, was because with the nerf to his Omen stance, he just doesn't do anything in Heat, but his neutral tools are strong enough that doesn't matter. Going down to C tier here, Nina and Bears obviously stand out, but for the most part, this is fine. And then D tier, I think there's no real arguments about these. So for the most part, considering this was 1 month after the game came out, I don't think this is too bad. I certainly think that this is a little bit better than what most people's initial predictions on tiers were at the time. And, you know, I'm giving myself a pat on the back for that. But anyway, that's going to do it for me. Once again, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.